"You don't belong here, lunch lady," sneered Jason Thompson, the 6th athletic director of Westridge High School. He towered over Ellen Rodriguez in the crowded teacher's lounge, his imposing frame blocking her path to the coffee machine. "This meeting is for faculty only, not kitchen staff. Why don't you go back to serving mystery meat where you belong?" The room fell silent as several teachers awkwardly looked away. Someone snickered. Ellen stood motionless, her weathered hands steady at her sides. For a brief moment, her uniform sleeve shifted, revealing a small, faded tattoo, a trident. Insignia partially visible. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she took a measured breath. They had just humiliated the wrong woman. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I wonder where you're watching this story unfold from today. Whatever corner of America you're in, you've probably witnessed someone being underestimated before. Perhaps you're in a bustling city like Seattle or a quiet town in the Midwest. Or maybe you're viewing from the rocky shores of Maine. Wherever you are, I'm sure you've seen the look of surprise when someone proves their doubters wrong. But rarely does it happen quite like this. Ellen Rodriguez had always been a woman of few words. At 42, her petite frame and quiet demeanor often led people to underestimate her. She worked in the cafeteria of Westridge High School in coastal Newport, Rhode Island, a picturesque town known for its naval base and maritime history. Ellen lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment overlooking the harbor, the kind with weathered shingles and windows that rattled during winter storms. It wasn't much, but it was enough for her and the collection of medals and commendations she kept in a hand-carved wooden box beneath her bed. 10 years had passed since she'd been honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy. 10 years since she'd been one of the first women to complete the brutally demanding SEAL training. 10 years since she decided to step away from military life and find a quieter path. These days, Ellen worked as the head cafeteria supervisor at Westridge High, overseeing meal preparation and nutrition plans for hundreds of teenagers. Her colleagues respected her efficiency and calm management style, even if they rarely included her in social gatherings or faculty events. What they didn't know was that her organizational skills and unflappable demeanor came not just from food, service training, but from years of leading high-stakes missions in the most dangerous corners of the world. Ellen had made a conscious choice to leave that life behind, to build something new without the pressure and intensity of special operations. The Trident insignia tattooed on her shoulder remained covered by her cafeteria uniform, a private reminder of who she had been. 3 years ago, Ellen's mother Maria had passed away after a prolonged battle with Alzheimer's. A former Navy nurse herself, she had been Ellen's rock, the person who taught her that true strength often comes wrapped in gentleness. Her mother's absence left a void that Ellen struggled to fill. For months after the funeral, she would swim laps at the local pool before dawn, pushing herself through the water with the same discipline that had carried her through SEAL training, finding solace in the rhythmic movement and controlled breathing. She kept her mother's prayer beads in her pocket, a tangible link to the woman who had taught her that kindness was not weakness, and that serving others was its own form of courage. The idea to apply for the cafeteria position had come during one of these early morning swims. Ellen had been volunteering at the local veteran center, helping with their nutrition program, when she overheard that Westridge High was looking for a new cafeteria manager. "You know," said Commander Jackson, a retired Navy officer she often spoke with, "those kids could use someone who understands discipline and nutrition. Schools are battlegrounds of a different sort these days." Ellen had smiled at the comparison, but the suggestion took root. She began researching school nutrition programs, studying budgeting for institutional kitchens, and developing menu plans that were both healthy and appealing to teenagers. After weeks of preparation, Ellen applied for the position. The school Board, impressed by her organizational skills and nutrition knowledge, hired her immediately. They never asked about the decade-long gap in her resume that she had simply labeled U.S. Navy service, and Ellen never volunteered the details. As far as Westridge High was concerned, she was just another cafeteria worker, albeit one who ran the kitchen with remarkable efficiency. For 3 years, Ellen had served the school community quietly. She learned students' names and dietary restrictions. She noticed which kids never had lunch money and discreetly ensured they ate anyway. She transformed the cafeteria from a place serving processed convenience foods to one offering nutritious, appealing meals within the same limited budget. The students had noticed the improvement, even if they couldn't identify its source. The faculty, however, barely registered Ellen's existence beyond her role as the lunch lady. Jason Thompson had arrived at Westridge High just 6 months ago, brought in with great fanfare as the new athletic director who would revitalize their struggling sports program. A former college football star whose professional aspirations had been cut short by a knee injury, Jason had built a reputation for turning around high school athletic departments across New England. His successes were chronicled in regional sports magazines and local news features, and he cultivated his celebrity status with carefully managed social media accounts, documenting his fitness regimen and motivational philosophy. From his first day, Jason made it clear that Westridge would be transformed through his vision of competitive excellence. He demanded more practice hours, stricter physical conditioning, and a championship mindset from every coach and athlete. The school administration, eager for the prestige and donor support that winning teams would bring, gave him unprecedented authority over scheduling, facilities, and even cafeteria options for athletes. When Jason first entered Ellen's domain, he'd barely acknowledged her presence. "I need a special meal plan for my athletes," he'd announced, dropping a folder on the counter. "High protein, specific macros. The regular lunch menu won't cut it." He didn't wait for a response before turning to leave. "Make it happen by next week." Ellen had reviewed his proposed meal plan that evening, noting immediately the problems with his approach. The next morning, she'd placed a revised plan in his mailbox, along with a note explaining the nutritional science behind her adjustments. When Jason stormed into the cafeteria during prep time, waving her revisions, Ellen calmly explained the rationale. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. These kids need balanced nutrition, not just protein loading," she said, pointing to her research-backed alternatives. "This approach will actually improve their performance and recovery time." Jason had snatched the papers from her hand. "I didn't ask for your opinion," he snapped. "Just follow the plan. I'm the expert here." He'd walked away, but Ellen noticed that he implemented several of her suggestions anyway, never acknowledging their source. That first encounter set the tone for what became an increasingly tense professional relationship. Jason viewed the cafeteria staff as service personnel who should defer to his expertise without question. Ellen, drawing on years of strategic planning in far more complex situations, continued to quietly implement evidence-based nutrition practices that benefited the students, regardless of Jason's directives. The situation escalated when Ellen proposed a comprehensive nutrition education program for student athletes. She developed materials explaining how proper eating patterns affected performance, recovery, and long-term health. When she presented the idea to the principal, Jason happened to be present. "We don't need the lunch lady playing nutritionist," he'd interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "I've got a sports medicine team for that." The principal, unwilling to challenge his star hire, had nodded along, and Ellen's proposal was shelved without discussion. In the following weeks, Jason began systematically undermining Ellen's authority in her own kitchen. He scheduled team meals that disrupted regular service hours without proper notice. He criticized her food quality during faculty meetings, suggesting that his athletes needed real food, not cafeteria slop. When budget discussions came up, he argued that funds should be redirected from general food service to special athletic nutrition. "This isn't just about meals," explained Carmen, Ellen's assistant, after a particularly difficult week. "He does this to anyone who doesn't fit his hierarchy. Either you're useful to his program or you're an obstacle." The warning accurately predicted the increasingly hostile environment Ellen found herself navigating. Jason's influence extended throughout the school. When Ellen sent nutritional information to coaches, her emails went unanswered. When she attended school events, she found herself isolated, with faculty members who had previously been friendly now keeping their distance. Even the principal, once supportive of her cafeteria innovations, began treating her suggestions with visible impatience. The marginalization extended beyond professional interactions. Ellen overheard comments in the hallway about just a lunch lady trying to act important. A faculty newsletter article about school resources prominently featured every department, except food services. When Ellen attempted to join a wellness committee, her application was misplaced twice before being rejected due to committee size limitations. During a parent-teacher association meeting where Ellen had been invited to discuss summer meal programs for low-income students, Jason had walked in late with several Booster Club members. He'd made a show of checking his watch and loudly whispering, "How much longer is the kitchen staff presentation? We have actual school business to discuss." Several parents had laughed, and Ellen noticed the PTA president anxiously shuffling through agenda items to accommodate Jason's implied request. Through it all, Ellen maintained her composure, showing up consistently and continuing to improve the nutrition program despite the hostile environment. In private moments, she would touch the Trident pin she kept in her pocket, remembering her SEAL instructor's words during Hell Week. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body. Discomfort is temporary. Excellence is forever." She focused on the WEU students, particularly those who struggled with food insecurity or health issues. She created a discreet system for ensuring that children who couldn't afford lunch still ate without embarrassment. She developed specialized menus for students with medical conditions and allergies. She started a small container garden outside the cafeteria windows, involving interested students in growing fresh herbs and vegetables. These small victories sustained her, even as Jason's campaign to diminish her role intensified. When the school board announced a comprehensive review of all departments, Jason saw an opportunity to consolidate his influence. He proposed outsourcing food services to a corporate provider that specialized in athletic nutrition, a move that would eliminate Ellen's position and give him control over meal planning. The proposal gained traction quickly. Board members, impressed by the glossy presentation and promises of enhanced athletic performance, seemed inclined to approve the change. Ellen submitted her own detailed response, documenting the improvements in overall student nutrition and budget efficiency she'd achieved, but found herself fighting an uphill battle against Jason's charismatic advocacy. The situation reached a critical point during the school assembly about career paths. Various faculty members had been invited to speak briefly about their professional journeys as inspiration for students considering their futures. Ellen, to her surprise, received an invitation, the first real acknowledgement of her role in the school community. As she prepared her brief remarks, focusing on the importance of food science and institutional nutrition, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps the tide was turning. The assembly was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, and Ellen spent the morning ensuring that lunch service ran smoothly so she could attend. When she arrived at the auditorium, however, she found her name had been removed from the program. "Sorry for the confusion," the vice principal said, not meeting her eyes. "We had to make some schedule adjustments. Maybe next time." Ellen nodded and turned to leave, glimpsing Jason in conversation with several board members near the stage, all of them laughing comfortably together. As she walked back to the cafeteria, Ellen overheard two teachers discussing the upcoming department review. "Thompson's got this locked up," one said. "The board loves him. That cafeteria outsourcing plan is practically approved already." Ellen paused, her military training instinctively kicking in as she assessed the situation with tactical clarity. She had been fighting the wrong battle, trying to win approval through conventional channels while Jason used his influence to change the rules of engagement. If she wanted to protect the nutrition program she'd built and the students who depended on it, she needed to change her approach. That evening, Ellen sat at her small kitchen table, reviewing her options with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to mission planning. The department review would culminate in a public presentation to the school board and community the following week. Each department head would showcase their achievements and vision for the future. As cafeteria supervisor, Ellen was technically included, though she suspected Jason had arranged for her time to be minimized. She pulled out her mother's prayer beads, running the smooth stones through her fingers as she contemplated her next move. "Every mission requires the right strategy for the terrain," her SEAL commander had often said. Ellen had been trying to navigate this terrain while pretending to be someone she wasn't. Perhaps it was time to draw on all of her training, not just the parts that fit neatly into her current role. The weekend passed in focused preparation. Ellen reviewed the school's nutrition metrics, documenting improvements in meal participation and decreased food waste. She gathered testimonials from students who had benefited from her specialized meal plans. She prepared a comprehensive budget comparison showing how her program outperformed both previous years and comparable outsourced services. But she also did something she hadn't done in nearly a decade. She trained with the intensity of her SEAL days. Before dawn on Saturday, she swam 2 miles in the choppy harbor waters. She ran the steep coastal trails, pushing herself beyond civilian comfort. She practiced the breathing techniques that had once kept her calm under enemy fire. By Sunday evening, Ellen felt centered in a way she hadn't experienced since leaving the service. Whatever happened at the review, she would face it with her full capabilities. Monday morning arrived with a clarity of purpose. Ellen organized her kitchen staff with military precision, ensuring that lunch service would proceed flawlessly even in her absence. She wore her standard cafeteria uniform but made one small, deliberate change. She left visible the edge of her Trident tattoo, just barely peeking above her collar. The department review was scheduled for that afternoon in the school library, transformed for the occasion with rows of chairs for community members and a podium for presentations. Ellen arrived early, noting the seating arrangement and sight lines with habitual tactical awareness. She placed her materials at the far end of the presenter's table and quietly took her assigned seat. The room filled gradually with teachers, administrators, board members, and interested parents. Jason arrived with his usual entourage of coaches and booster club members, his confident demeanor suggesting he considered the outcome already decided. He nodded to various influencers in the room while studiously ignoring Ellen's presence. Principal Harrington called the meeting to order, explaining the review process and introducing the department heads who would be presenting. "We'll hear from academics first, followed by athletics, student services, and support staff," he announced. Each presenter has 10 minutes, followed by questions. The academic presentations proceeded smoothly, with department heads showcasing student achievements and curriculum innovations. When Jason's turn came, he bounded to the podium with characteristic energy, his presentation slick with professional graphics and carefully edited videos of athletic victories. "Westridge isn't just building athletes," he proclaimed, his voice filling the room. "We're building champions on and off the field, but excellence requires comprehensive support." He clicked to a slide showing his proposed restructuring, including the cafeteria outsourcing plan prominently featured. Some of our current systems are frankly outdated. We need nutrition science, not lunch ladies." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the audience. Ellen noticed several board members nodding along with Jason's assessment. As he concluded to enthusiastic applause from his supporters, Ellen gathered her materials and prepared for her abbreviated slot, scheduled last among the support staff presentations. When her turn finally came, nearly 2 hours into the meeting, attention in the room had noticeably waned. Board members checked their phones while parents whispered among themselves. Jason and his group had moved to the back of the room, clearly considering the substantive portion of the meeting concluded. "Next, we'll hear from Ellen Rodriguez, Cafeteria Services," Principal Harrington announced, glancing at his watch. "Please, keep to 7 minutes as we're running behind schedule." Ellen approached the podium calmly, placing her materials with deliberate precision. She surveyed the room, using the situational awareness techniques that had once helped her assess hostile territory. Then she began, her voice quiet but carrying a natural authority that caused several distracted attendees to look up in surprise. "I'd like to begin by addressing some misconceptions about the cafeteria program," she said, her tone measured and confident. "Mr. Thompson suggested that our current nutrition approach is outdated and unprofessional. The data suggests otherwise." Ellen clicked to her first slide, showing detailed metrics on meal quality, participation rates, and budget efficiency. "Under my supervision, our program has achieved a 23% increase in student participation, while decreasing costs by 15%. We've eliminated processed foods while staying within budget constraints. And we've implemented individualized nutrition plans for students with specific needs, including our athletes." She moved efficiently through her presentation, highlighting innovations that had transformed the cafeteria from an institutional feeding operation to a nutrition education center. As she spoke, the room grew increasingly attentive, board members setting aside their phones to focus on her unexpectedly professional analysis. "But statistics only tell part of the story," Ellen continued, clicking to a slide showing students working in the cafeteria garden. "Our program addresses not just physical nourishment, but food literacy. We're teaching students where food comes from and how it affects their bodies and minds." From the back of the room, Jason cleared his throat loudly. "This is all very nice," he interrupted, "but we're talking about basic cafeteria operations, not some fancy nutrition program. The reality is, we need professional meal planning for our athletes, not home economics projects." A tense silence fell over the room. Principal Harrington looked uncomfortable, but didn't intervene. Ellen turned toward Jason, her posture shifting subtly into a stance that any military person would immediately recognize: feet balanced, spine straight, shoulders relaxed but ready. "I appreciate your perspective, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice taking on a new edge that commanded attention. "But I believe my professional qualifications are relevant to this discussion." With deliberate movements, Ellen reached into her folder and removed a single sheet of paper. "Before joining Westridge, I served 10 years in the United States Navy. My final position was as Nutrition and Physical Performance Specialist for Naval Special Warfare Group 2. She paused, letting the information register. "In other words, I was responsible for designing nutrition protocols for Navy SEALs." A murmur spread through the audience. Jason's confident expression faltered slightly. "During my service," Ellen continued, "I completed SEAL training myself, becoming one of the first women to earn this qualification. I designed nutrition programs for operators conducting missions in extreme environments, where physical and mental performance margins mean the difference between life and death." The room had gone completely still, all attention now riveted on the unassuming cafeteria supervisor. Ellen clicked to her next slide, which showed a comparison between her current student-athlete nutrition plan and the one Jason had proposed. Mr. Thompson's outsourcing plan prioritizes protein loading and supplement integration. She explained, her analysis clear and unemotional. This approach can create short-term performance gains, but increases injury risk and recovery time. My program emphasizes balanced macronutrients, proper hydration cycling, and periodized nutrition that synchronizes with training schedules, the same approach used by elite military units and professional sports teams. Ellen turned directly to the school board members. I've remained quiet about my background because I wanted my work here to stand on its own merits. But I cannot stand by while misinformation threatens a program that benefits every student in this school, not just athletes. From the back of the room, Jason stepped forward, visibly struggling to regain control of the narrative. "This is ridiculous," he said, forcing a laugh. "Are we seriously supposed to believe the lunch lady was some kind of Navy SEAL? Where's your proof?" The moment of challenge hung in the air. Ellen met his gaze steadily, then reached into her pocket and removed her Trident pin, placing it on the podium. Anyone with military knowledge would recognize the iconic SEAL emblem instantly. "My service record is available for verification," she said simply. "But I'd prefer we focus on the nutrition program itself, which is what matters to our students." An older man near the front, whom Ellen recognized as a retired military officer and school board member, stood up slowly. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, "but I can confirm Ms. Rodriguez's service. I reviewed her personnel file when she was hired, though the specifics were classified. Her qualifications are legitimate and, frankly, extraordinary." The revelation sent another wave of whispers through the audience. Jason stood frozen, his challenge backfiring visibly as community members turned to look at him with expressions ranging from confusion to disapproval. Ellen used the moment to conclude her presentation, highlighting the inclusive nature of her nutrition program. "Every student at Westridge deserves optimal nutrition, not just those on sports teams. My proposal expands services without increasing costs, benefiting the entire school community." As she finished, the room erupted in applause, tentative at first, then growing in enthusiasm. Board members leaned together in urgent conference, while parents turned to each other with expressions of amazement. Jason and his supporters remained in stunned silence, their outsourcing plan suddenly facing unexpected resistance. The question period that followed became essentially a forum for Ellen to elaborate on her nutrition philosophy and military experience. Parents who had never spoken to her before approached with interest and respect. Teachers who had previously ignored her sought her insight on how nutrition affected classroom performance. Principal Harrington, reading the room's dramatic shift, announced that the board would need time to reconsider all proposals before making final decisions. As the meeting dispersed, Ellen found herself surrounded by curious and supportive community members, while Jason departed quickly with his much diminished entourage. In the days following the department review, Ellen's revelation rippled through Westridge High like a stone dropped in still water. Teachers who had previously walked past her without a second glance now paused to introduce themselves. Students whispered as she passed in the hallways, their perceptions irrevocably altered. The cafeteria, once considered merely a necessary service area, became a point of fascination. Ellen navigated this sudden visibility with the same quiet composure she'd maintained throughout her years at the school. When curious faculty members inquired about her military experience, she answered directly but briefly, always steering the conversation back to nutrition and student needs. When wide-eyed students asked if she had killed anyone, she gently redirected their questions to more constructive topics like how proper nutrition affected their academic performance and athletic capabilities. "I'm the same person I was last week," she told Carmen as they prepared breakfast service on the first morning after the review. "The only difference is that now people know a little more about my background." But that small difference had profound implications. Principal Harrington called Ellen to his office the following day, visibly uncomfortable as she took the seat across from his desk. For nearly 3 years, their interactions had been limited to brief, formal exchanges about cafeteria budgets and scheduling. Now he struggled to reconcile the unassuming cafeteria supervisor with the decorated veteran revealed at the meeting. "I must admit, Ms. Rodriguez," he began, clearing his throat, "I was quite surprised by the information you shared yesterday. Your personnel file mentioned military service, but not the extent of your qualifications." Ellen nodded. "My specific role wasn't relevant to my position here," she said simply. "I was hired to manage the cafeteria, which is what I've done." Principal Harrington shifted in his seat. "Yes, well, in light of your background, the board is reconsidering the department restructuring proposals. They've asked me to inform you that the outsourcing plan has been shelved indefinitely." Ellen accepted the news with a measured nod. "I'm glad to hear that. The current program is serving our students well." "There's something else," Harrington continued, his discomfort visibly increasing. "The board has suggested that your expertise might be valuable beyond the cafeteria. They've proposed creating a new position, Director of Student Wellness, that would encompass nutrition, physical fitness coordination, and health education. They'd like you to consider taking on this expanded role." The offer hung in the air. Between them, Ellen recognized it for what it was: part genuine appreciation for her qualifications, part damage control by administrators who had allowed a valuable resource to go unrecognized for years. She thought carefully before responding. "I'm committed to improving student wellness," she said finally. "But any new position would need to maintain the nutrition program's integrity and ensure equitable services for all students, not just athletes." Harrington nodded quickly, relieved by her measured response. "Of course, the board wants to schedule a meeting next week to discuss details. They're quite eager to make amends for any oversight regarding your contributions." As Ellen left the principal's office, she encountered Jason in the hallway. The athletic director had been noticeably absent from the cafeteria since the review, sending assistants to handle interactions with food services. Now finding themselves face to face, both paused in momentary recognition of the altered dynamic between them. Jason spoke first, his usual confidence diminished but not entirely gone. "Rodriguez," he said with a stiff nod. "Quite a show you put on at the review." Ellen met his gaze directly. "It wasn't a show, Mr. Thompson. Just relevant information for an important decision." Jason glanced around to ensure they were alone before continuing. "Look, I might have been hasty in my assessment of the cafeteria program. Professional difference of opinion." His words fell short of an apology, but his body language suggested a man struggling to adapt to a suddenly changed landscape. "The nutrition program benefits your athletes," Ellen replied evenly. "That has not changed. My door is always open if you want to discuss how we can better support their performance goals." She moved past him without waiting for a response, maintaining the professional courtesy that had always characterized her interactions regardless of how they were received. Word of Ellen's background spread beyond the school walls, reaching local media through the inevitable community grapevine. A reporter from the Newport Gazette contacted the school requesting an interview with the Navy's lunch lady, a characterization that made Ellen wince when Harrington forwarded the message. "You do not have to respond," the principal assured her. "The school can issue a general statement about our nutrition program without involving you directly." Ellen considered the option carefully. Her military training had instilled a deep aversion to publicity. SEALs operated in the shadows, their identities and actions shielded from public view by necessity and tradition. Yet she also recognized that her current mission was different. Visibility properly managed could advance her goals for the students in her care. "I will speak with them," she decided, "but only about the nutrition program and student wellness. My military services background context not the focus." The resulting article from Battlefield to Cafeteria, Veteran Brings Special Forces. Precision to School Nutrition struck the balance Ellen had requested. While acknowledging her unusual career path, the piece focused primarily on her innovations in school nutrition and the measurable improvements in student health markers since her arrival. The reporter respectfully mentioned but did not sensationalize her seal background, noting simply that she had served with distinction in naval special warfare before transitioning to civilian life. The article might have generated a brief flurry of local interest before fading into obscurity had it not been discovered by a national veterans advocacy group that shared it on social media. Within days, Ellen's story had spread across multiple platforms, resonating particularly with discussions about veterans' transition to civilian life and women in combat roles. Ellen's inbox filled with messages from former military personnel facing their own transition challenges, female veterans seeking advice on navigating male-dominated environments, and nutrition professionals interested in her institutional approaches. She answered each message thoughtfully, drawing on her own experience, while acknowledging the unique path each person would need to find. "Remember that your military skills translate in ways you might not expect," she wrote to one struggling former Marine. "The discipline, adaptability, and service mindset that made you effective in uniform are equally valuable in civilian settings. The key is finding where to apply them authentically." At school, the attention created a complex new reality. Most students and faculty seemed genuinely interested in learning from Ellen's experience, approaching her with questions about both nutrition and her military background. But she also noticed some colleagues growing uncomfortable with her elevated profile, particularly those who had previously dismissed or marginalized her. Jason Thompson's response proved especially interesting to observe. After their hallway encounter, he had retreated into careful professional distance, neither antagonistic nor friendly in their limited interactions. But as media attention to Ellen's story grew, she noticed him watching her with calculating assessment, a strategist re-evaluating his position. The shift came during a faculty meeting 3 weeks after the department review. The agenda included discussion of a proposed wellness initiative that would incorporate elements of Ellen's nutrition program alongside physical education and mental health resources. As various department heads offered input, Jason raised his hand. "I would like to address the athletic department's role in this initiative," he said, his confident voice commanding attention as always. Then, to everyone's surprise, he continued, "And I want to acknowledge that my previous approach was incomplete. After reviewing Ms. Rodriguez's nutrition protocols more carefully, I believe there is significant value in her methodology that could enhance our athletic program." The room fell silent at this unexpected concession. Ellen, sitting quietly in her usual spot at the back of the room, met Jason's gaze with measured acknowledgement as he continued, "I am proposing that we integrate her periodized nutrition approach with our training schedules, particularly for recovery optimization. The research supports her methods, and I believe our athletes would benefit from this collaborative approach." Principal Harrington, clearly relieved by this diplomatic turn, nodded enthusiastically. "That sounds like an excellent proposal, Jason. Ellen, would you be willing to work with the athletic department on this integration?" "Of course," Ellen replied simply. The goal has always been optimal student wellness. As the meeting dispersed, Jason approached Ellen directly, his manner more genuinely collegial than ever before. "I meant what I said in there," he told her, the performative aspect of his usual interactions notably absent. "I did some research on the nutrition protocols used by elite military units. Your approach aligns with current best practices in sports medicine." Ellen recognized the statement as the closest thing to an apology his pride would allow. "Athletic performance nutrition is constantly evolving," she acknowledged. "I am happy to share what I have learned and hear your insights as well." Jason nodded, a flicker of his former confidence returning, though tempered with new respect. "I have scheduled a department meeting tomorrow to discuss training adaptations. If you are available, I would like you to present your recovery nutrition concepts to my coaching staff. The invitation represented a significant shift in their professional dynamic. Ellen agreed, and the following day found herself addressing the assembled coaches in the athletic department conference room. As she outlined her approach to nutrition, timing, macronutrient balance, and recovery optimization, she noticed the coaches' initial skepticism gradually transform into engaged interest. The principles that work for special operators apply equally to student athletes, she explained, displaying graphs that tracked performance metrics against nutrition variables. The physical demands are different, but the body's response mechanisms are the same. Proper nutrition timing can reduce recovery time by up to 40% and significantly decrease injury rates. By the session's end, coaches were asking detailed questions about implementation strategies for their specific sports. Jason, observing from the back of the room, nodded with measured approval at the response. As the coaches filed out, he approached Ellen with an unexpected question. The mental toughness component of SEAL training, is that something that could be adapted for high school athletes? Not the physical extremes, he clarified quickly, but the psychological resilience aspects. The question revealed genuine curiosity rather than challenge, and Ellen considered it thoughtfully. Some elements could be adapted appropriately, she said. Focus techniques, team cohesion exercises, goal-setting frameworks. But it would need careful modification for adolescent development stages. Jason nodded, his expression suggesting new possibilities forming. Would you be willing to consult on that aspect as well? My strength training program is solid, but I have been looking for more effective mental conditioning approaches. This tentative collaboration marked the beginning of a transformed professional relationship. Over the following weeks, Ellen and Jason developed a comprehensive wellness approach that integrated nutrition, physical training, and mental resilience elements. Their combined expertise created a program that addressed student needs more holistically than either could have achieved alone. The partnership did not develop without challenges. Jason's ingrained competitiveness occasionally manifested as attempts to control joint initiatives. Ellen's preference for methodical implementation sometimes clashed with his desire for immediate visible results. But they found a working balance, each recognizing the other's legitimate strengths. Students became the ultimate beneficiaries of this unexpected alliance. Athletes reported improved recovery times and reduced fatigue during intensive training periods. Academic performance metrics showed positive correlation with the enhanced nutrition program. Even school attendance improved slightly, a change the administration attributed to better overall student wellness. Ellen found herself in an unfamiliar position, increasingly visible within the school community and sought after for her expertise. The transition challenged her preference for operating behind the scenes, a habit deeply ingrained during her military service. Yet she recognized that this new mission required a different approach. In the teams, we learn to be the quiet professionals, she explained to Carmen, who had asked about her adjustment to the attention. Effectiveness without recognition was the standard, but here visibility serves the mission. If my experience helps these kids take better care of themselves, then it is worth the discomfort of being noticed. This philosophy guided Ellen's approach to her expanding role. When the school board formalized the Director of Student Wellness position and unanimously approved her appointment, she accepted with characteristic understatement, immediately focusing on implementation rather than the recognition itself. The position came with a small office adjacent to both the cafeteria and gymnasium, symbolizing the bridge her role created between previously separated domains. Ellen transformed the space into a resource center, stocking it with nutrition information, training guides, and wellness resources accessible to all students. She maintained regular hours for consultation, creating an open-door policy that welcomed everyone from varsity athletes to struggling freshmen seeking guidance. Not everyone embraced the changes Ellen's elevated role brought to Westridge. Some faculty members who had previously ignored the lunch lady now found themselves uncomfortable with her authority in wellness matters. A few coaches initially resisted coordination with nutrition planning, viewing it as interference with their established methods. Even some parents questioned whether a cafeteria supervisor, regardless of military background, should have influence over broader student wellness policies. Ellen navigated these challenges with the same strategic patience that had served her in military operations. Rather than forcing compliance, she demonstrated effectiveness through measurable results. When resistance arose, she focused on building allies among those genuinely interested in student outcomes. She documented improvements meticulously, creating data-driven justification for her approaches that gradually won over even skeptical stakeholders. Jason, surprisingly, became one of her strongest advocates. Having publicly aligned himself with her methods, he had personal investment in their success. His influence with the athletic community helped overcome resistance from traditional coaches, while his promotional skills highlighted program achievements to parents and administrators. "You know," he commented after a particularly successful joint presentation to the Booster Club, "we make a pretty effective team when we're not working against each other." Ellen allowed herself a small smile at the observation. "Different tactics, same mission," she replied, echoing a phrase from her SEAL days that acknowledged how diverse approaches could serve unified objectives. As Ellen's first semester in the new position progressed, an unexpected opportunity arose through her growing network of contacts. A regional education conference invited her to present on military precision in educational wellness programs, offering a platform to share Westridge's innovative approach with schools throughout New England. Ellen initially hesitated, her instinctive aversion to publicity resurfacing. "I'm not a public speaker," she told Principal Harrington when he enthusiastically forwarded the invitation. "Perhaps Jason would be better suited for this kind of presentation." Harrington shook his head firmly. "They specifically requested you, Ellen. Your background creates a unique perspective that other schools want to hear. Jason can certainly participate, but your leadership on this would be invaluable." After careful consideration, Ellen agreed to the presentation, approaching it with the same methodical preparation she applied to all missions. She developed a comprehensive outline, prepared detailed implementation guides for attendees, and practiced her delivery with Carmen and trusted faculty allies. Her goal was not personal recognition, but mission effectiveness, sharing successful strategies that could benefit students beyond Westridge. The day of the conference arrived crisp and clear, an October morning tinged with autumn colors. Ellen drove to the convention center in Providence with Jason, who had indeed joined the presentation team, along with the school nurse and a physical education teacher. Their collaborative approach would showcase how integrated wellness programs could function across traditional school departments. As they set up their materials in the assigned meeting room, Ellen noticed the space filling beyond capacity. Educators from throughout the region crowded in, many standing along the walls when seats ran out. The level of interest surprised her. She had expected a modest audience for what she considered a specialized topic. When the moderator introduced her, highlighting both her SEAL background and educational innovations, Ellen stepped to the podium with the composed focus that had carried her through far more dangerous situations. She began not with her military credentials but with student outcomes, presenting the measurable improvements Westridge had documented since implementing the integrated wellness approach. "The principles that guide this program are transferable to any educational setting," she explained, her quiet voice nevertheless carrying authority that commanded attention. "They don't require military experience to implement, just commitment to evidence-based practices and student-centered design." As Ellen outlined the program's components, she noticed heads nodding throughout the room. Educators leaned forward, taking notes and exchanging glances of recognition when she addressed common challenges The presentation transitioned smoothly to her colleagues, each explaining their role in the integrated approach, with Jason delivering a surprisingly humble account of how athletic training had evolved under the collaborative model. The question period that followed revealed intense interest in practical implementation. School administrators wanted to know about budget implications. Teachers asked about classroom integration, and coaches sought specifics on performance metrics. Ellen and her team answered each query with concrete examples and adaptable frameworks, emphasizing that the approach could be customized for different school environments. As the session concluded to enthusiastic applause, educators surrounded their table, requesting additional resources and contact information. Ellen found herself engaged in multiple conversations simultaneously, her natural reserve giving way to genuine passion for the subject matter. "This is just the beginning," the conference organizer told her as the crowd finally dispersed. "There's national interest in your approach. The intersection of military precision and educational wellness is a compelling model, especially with your unique background." Ellen received this prediction with measured acknowledgement, neither embracing nor rejecting the implied trajectory. Her focus remained on the immediate mission, returning to Westridge and continuing to improve student outcomes there. Yet she recognized that broader impact aligned with her service ethos. If her experience could benefit students beyond her direct reach, that expanded mission deserved consideration. The conference presentation marked another turning point in Ellen's unlikely journey from shadow warrior to educational innovator. Requests for program information and consultation arrived from schools throughout the region, creating both challenges and opportunities for Westridge's pioneering team. Principal Harrington, recognizing the potential for institutional advancement, proposed creating a formal outreach program that would share their model while generating resources for further development. This could become a signature initiative. He explained during a planning meeting, "Westridge is a center of excellence in student wellness with your program as the foundation." Ellen considered the proposal carefully, weighing institutional benefits against her core mission of serving students. Any outreach program would need to maintain focus on practical implementation, she stipulated. Not theory or publicity, but transferable practices that directly benefit students. With this guiding principle established, the Westridge Wellness Initiative took shape as a structured program available to other educational institutions. Ellen developed standardized training materials that distilled key components into implementable modules. Jason created assessment frameworks that allowed schools to measure outcomes and adjust approaches based on their specific populations. Together, they designed a consultant model that provided ongoing support rather than one-time inspiration. The initiative gained momentum throughout the academic year, attracting attention from educational publications and policy organizations. A profile in educational leadership highlighted the program's unique origins and evidence-based methodology. The State Department of Education invited Ellen and Jason to advise on wellness policy revisions. Even national organizations began to take notice, with inquiries arriving from school districts across the country. Through this expanding recognition, Ellen maintained her fundamental approach: quiet competence, focused on meaningful outcomes rather than personal prominence. She deflected attention toward the program itself and the team that implemented it, emphasizing that its success depended on collaboration rather than individual expertise. "The most effective operations I participated in were never about singular heroes," she explained when a journalist pressed for personal details about her military experience. "They succeeded because every team member executed their role with precision and commitment to the shared objective. Our wellness program works on the same principle." This philosophy resonated with educators facing their own institutional challenges. They recognized in Ellen's approach a model that honored their experience while offering practical paths to improvement. The program's emphasis on measurable Outcomes and adaptable implementation appealed to administrators navigating budget constraints and competing priorities. As winter settled over Newport, bringing stormy seas and early darkness, Ellen found her program taking root in ways she hadn't anticipated. Beyond the formal structures of the Westridge Wellness Initiative, she observed subtle cultural shifts. Throughout the school community, students began organizing their own study groups in the Wellness Center, creating peer support networks for both academic and personal challenges. Teachers incorporated nutrition and wellness concepts into diverse subjects, from biology classes analyzing metabolic processes to history courses, examining how nutrition had influenced military campaigns. Most significantly, Ellen noticed a transformation in how students approached their own potential. The revelation that their unassuming cafeteria supervisor had once been an elite special operator created a powerful narrative about hidden strength and unexpected capability that resonated throughout the school. "You've given them permission to reimagine themselves," observed Dr. Patel, the school counselor, during a wellness team meeting. "Students who felt limited by others' perceptions are questioning those boundaries. It's affecting their academic confidence, their willingness to attempt challenges, even their career aspirations." This unintended consequence of Ellen's revealed background manifested in numerous small interactions. A struggling student who had been labeled "not college material" by a previous counselor asked Ellen about her educational path through military service. A shy girl who had quit the swim team after being bullied approached Ellen about techniques for mental toughness. The president of the science club, facing criticism for her ambitious research proposal, sought advice on handling dismissive feedback from authority figures. Ellen met each question with thoughtful consideration, drawing on her experiences without glorifying the military aspects of her background. She emphasized the universal principles that had guided her through challenges: preparation, perseverance, purposeful action, and perspective in the face of setbacks. "The most valuable skill I learned wasn't physical," she told a group of students during an informal lunch discussion. "It was the ability to separate discomfort from danger, to recognize that feeling challenged or uncomfortable doesn't mean you're in actual jeopardy. That distinction allows you to push through difficulty when it serves your greater purpose." These conversations expanded Ellen's impact beyond wellness metrics into the realm of student development. Principal Harrington, observing this influence, approached her about formalizing another dimension of her role. "The mentorship you're providing happens naturally because students seek you out," he explained during a private meeting in early December. "But I'm wondering if we should create structured opportunities for this kind of guidance. Perhaps a leadership development component within the wellness program." Ellen considered the suggestion carefully. "Effective mentorship requires trust and authentic connection," she noted. "Those elements can't be fully institutionalized. But we could create frameworks that facilitate natural mentoring relationships while providing consistent guidance principles." From this conversation emerged the Westridge Personal Excellence Program, designed as an optional enrichment opportunity for students seeking to develop personal effectiveness skills. Unlike traditional leadership programs focused on positional authority, this initiative emphasized internal discipline, resilience, goal achievement, and ethical decision-making qualities Ellen had found essential in both military and civilian contexts. The program launched with a modest cohort of 15 students selected through application and interview processes. The diverse group included athletes and academics, extroverts and introverts, high achievers and struggling students unified only by their genuine interest in personal development. Ellen designed a curriculum that translated applicable military training principles into age-appropriate challenges. Students learned goal-setting techniques used by special operations teams, communication protocols that ensured clarity under pressure, and decision-making frameworks that balanced mission objectives with ethical considerations. Physical training incorporated functional fitness rather than military-style conditioning, focusing on progressive improvement rather than arbitrary standards. Most importantly, the program emphasized practical application over theoretical knowledge. Each student identified personal missions, meaningful objectives in academic, athletic, creative, or community domains, and developed strategic approaches to achieving them. Weekly sessions included progress assessment, obstacle analysis, and strategy refinement, creating accountability while building problem-solving capabilities. Jason Thompson, intrigued by the program's potential applications for athletic leadership, volunteered to assist with specific modules. His involvement surprised Ellen initially, given his previous emphasis on competitive achievement over personal development. Yet she observed a continuing evolution in his approach, a growing appreciation for development processes alongside performance outcomes. "I've been thinking about what creates sustainable excellence," he explained when she inquired about his interest. "Winning is important, but I'm seeing that how we develop winners matters more than I realized. Some of my most talented athletes plateau because they lack the internal framework your program addresses." This recognition reflected Jason's own developmental journey over the past months. His initial reaction to Ellen's revealed background competitive reassessment, followed by strategic alliance, had gradually transformed into genuine professional respect and collaborative partnership. The athletic director who had once dismissed the lunch lady now regularly sought her input on program decisions, valuing her perspective even when it challenged his assumptions. Their professional relationship, observed throughout the school community, became its own object lesson in growth and adaptation. Students and faculty witnessed how two strong personalities with different approaches could navigate from conflict to collaboration when united by shared purpose and mutual respect. "You two have created a powerful example of effective partnership," Dr. Patel commented during a wellness team meeting. "The students notice that you can disagree without becoming adversarial, that you each contribute different strengths to shared objectives. That's a rare model in educational settings where territorial thinking often prevails." As winter deepened, Ellen's expanding responsibilities created new challenges. The demands of the Wellness Initiative, outreach program, and mentorship activities stretched her capacity beyond what one person could reasonably manage. She found herself working extended hours, arriving before dawn to supervise kitchen operations, and staying late for program development and administrative tasks. Carmen observed this unsustainable pattern with growing concern. "You're approaching this like a deployment," she told Ellen one evening as they prepared the next day's meal plans. "Operating at maximum capacity without recovery cycles. But this isn't a temporary mission with a defined endpoint. This is your life now." The observation struck home. Ellen recognized the familiar pattern from her military days, the tendency to subordinate personal needs to mission requirements, to push beyond reasonable limits in service of objectives. That approach had been necessary and appropriate in combat operations with defined parameters. Applied to ongoing educational work, it risked both effectiveness and well-being. "You're right," she acknowledged after thoughtful consideration. "Sustainability requires different resource management. I need to apply what I teach the students about recovery and resilience." This realization prompted Ellen to reassess her approach to her expanding role. Drawing on military planning principles, she conducted a comprehensive resource analysis, identifying critical functions that required her personal attention versus components that could be effectively delegated. She developed training protocols for staff members taking on additional responsibilities, ensuring they understood both technical requirements and underlying principles. Most significantly, Ellen recognized the need to build institutional capacity beyond her personal contribution. The programs she had developed needed to become self-sustaining systems rather than extensions of her individual effort. This transition required careful design considerations, documentation of processes, and cultivation of leadership throughout the organization. I'm thinking about long-term sustainability, she explained to Principal Harrington during their mid-year review. These initiatives shouldn't depend on any single person for their continued effectiveness. We need to create structural supports and distribute expertise across multiple stakeholders. Harrington nodded with understanding. That's actually a conversation the board wants to have with you. The programs you've developed have become central to Westridge's identity and strategic position. They want to ensure these initiatives continue to thrive and evolve, regardless of personnel changes. The board meeting that followed focused on institutionalizing the wellness and excellence programs as permanent features of Westridge's educational approach. Board members, impressed by documented outcomes and growing external recognition, proposed creating a dedicated administrative division with appropriate staffing and resources. They also discussed succession planning and knowledge transfer, protocols to protect program integrity through inevitable transitions. We want to offer you a formal leadership position, the board chair explained. Executive Director of Wellness and Excellence Programs, with expanded authority and resources to build sustainable systems. The role would involve less direct service, delivery, and more strategic oversight, program development, and team leadership. The offer represented both recognition and transition acknowledgement of Ellen's contributions and an invitation to evolve her role from frontline implementer to institutional leader. The decision carried significant implications for her professional identity and daily experience, requiring careful consideration rather than immediate response. I appreciate the confidence this represents, she told the board. I'd like to take some time to consider how I can best serve the school's mission moving forward. The question occupied Ellen's thoughts throughout the following weeks as she continued managing her various responsibilities. She found herself reflecting on her journey from military service through cafeteria management to her current, multifaceted role, considering the common threads that connected these seemingly disparate chapters. During a weekend visit to the harbor, watching winter waves crash against the breakwater, Ellen gained clarity about the pattern underlying her career choices. Whether leading special operations missions, ensuring nutritious meals for students, or developing wellness programs, she had consistently focused on creating systems that enabled people to perform at their best under challenging conditions. The context changed, but the fundamental purpose remained constant: removing obstacles to human potential and building capacity for excellence. This recognition helped Ellen see the proposed leadership role not as a departure from direct service, but as an evolution of her core mission. By developing systems and cultivating leaders, she could potentially impact more students than through personal implementation alone. The position offered leverage for her expertise and values, expanding their influence beyond what individual effort could achieve. When Ellen accepted the executive director position in late January, she did so with characteristic focus on mission rather than personal advancement. Her first actions in the new role emphasized this priority, establishing clear outcome metrics, developing staff training programs, and creating documentation systems that captured program principles rather than just procedures. We're building for sustainability and evolution, she explained during her first leadership team meeting. These programs should continue improving long after any of us move on to other responsibilities. Our success metric isn't short-term recognition, but lasting positive impact on student development. This approach guided the program's expansion through the remainder of the academic year. Ellen assembled a diverse team that brought complementary strengths to the initiative, deliberately including perspectives that challenged her own thinking. She established decision-making processes that balanced efficiency with inclusive input, creating ownership across the organization while maintaining clear direction. Jason Thompson became a key ally in this transition, applying his promotional and relationship-building skills to secure resources and institutional support. Their partnership continued to evolve, with each recognizing the other's distinct contribution. to their shared objectives. What had begun as antagonism, transformed into pragmatic alliance, now functioned as genuine collaboration based on mutual respect and common purpose. "You know what surprised me most about working with you?" Jason commented during a planning session for the following year's program expansion. "Not your background or expertise, impressive as those are. It's your approach to achievement. How you focus on building systems rather than claiming credit, on developing capability rather than demonstrating superiority. That's not what I expected from someone with your military credentials." Ellen considered this observation thoughtfully. "In the teams, we learned quickly that individual heroics rarely accomplish complex missions. Sustained success requires building capacity across the unit, ensuring that excellence becomes standard procedure rather than exceptional performance. That principle applies everywhere, not just in combat operations." This philosophy informed Ellen's leadership approach. As the Westridge programs gained regional and then national attention, when educational journals published case studies of their success, she ensured they highlighted systemic factors and team contributions rather than personal narrative. When other schools requested program information, she developed comprehensive resource packages that enabled implementation without consultant dependency. When speaking at conferences, she emphasized transferable principles over personal experience. By late spring, the Westridge Wellness Initiative had been adopted by 17 schools across New England, with documented improvements in student performance, attendance, and health metrics. The Personal Excellence Program had expanded to 3 cohorts at Westridge and initiated pilot programs in neighboring districts. National education organizations had begun incorporating elements of both programs into recommended best practices for student development. Through this period of expansion and recognition, Ellen maintained her connection to Westridge's students and the original mission that had brought her to the school. Though administrative responsibilities limited her direct service hours, she continued teaching selected program components and mentoring individual students. She regularly visited the cafeteria, working alongside staff during busy periods and ensuring that the nutrition program maintained its foundational quality. "Never forget that everything we build here serves a specific purpose, helping young people develop their full potential," she reminded her growing staff during a team retreat. "The program's recognition and expansion are means to that end, not objectives in themselves. When we make decisions, the first question should always be how it affects the students we serve." This student-centered focus guided the initiative through inevitable challenges and growing pains. When implementation in other schools revealed contextual factors requiring program adaptation, Ellen's team developed flexible frameworks rather than rigid protocols. When resource limitations threatened program quality, they created tiered implementation models that preserved essential elements while accommodating various capacity levels. When administrative demands risked disconnecting leadership from frontline realities, they established rotation systems that kept all team members engaged with direct service. The approach proved particularly valuable when a prominent national publication featured Westridge in a cover story titled "The SEAL Way: Military Precision Meets Education Innovation." The article, while generally accurate and positive, emphasized Ellen's military background over program substance, creating a narrative that risked misrepresenting their work as paramilitary training rather than holistic development. Ellen addressed the mischaracterization directly in a school-wide assembly, her first public speaking engagement that wasn't specifically program-related. Standing before the assembled students and faculty, she spoke with uncharacteristic personal disclosure about the relationship between her military experience and educational work. "The programs we've developed at Westridge draw on certain principles I learned in military service," she acknowledged, particularly around purposeful action, continuous improvement, and resilience through challenges. "But their foundation isn't military discipline, or hierarchical authority. It's respect for human potential and commitment to creating conditions where that potential can flourish. She paused, surveying the attentive faces before continuing. The most valuable insight I gained from military service wasn't about control or power, but about possibility, about how ordinary people accomplish extraordinary things when given appropriate support, meaningful purpose, and genuine belief in their capability. That insight applies everywhere human beings strive to grow and contribute, especially in educational settings. The assembly concluded with Ellen inviting students to share their own experiences with the wellness and excellence programs, creating space for authentic voices to supplement her perspective. Their diverse testimonials, from improved academic confidence to healthier relationships with food and physical activity, provided compelling evidence that the initiative's impact extended far beyond its military-inspired elements. This student-centered narrative helped correct external perceptions, while reinforcing internal alignment around core program values. It also reflected Ellen's evolving comfort with visibility and voice, her growing recognition that strategic disclosure could advance mission objectives when approached with intention and integrity. As the academic year drew toward conclusion, Ellen found herself reflecting on the journey from cafeteria supervisor to educational innovator. The transformation seemed both improbable and inevitable in retrospect, an unexpected application of her unique background that nevertheless aligned perfectly with her fundamental values and capabilities. During a quiet evening in her Harbor View apartment, Ellen opened the wooden box containing her military commendations, examining them with fresh perspective. The medals and citations represented missions accomplished under extreme conditions, objectives achieved through precision and perseverance. Yet they told an incomplete story, documenting outcomes without capturing the underlying purpose that had given meaning to the challenges and sacrifices. Ellen placed her newest acquisition alongside the military honors, a handwritten note from a Westridge senior who had participated in the Personal Excellence Program. Before this year, I believed what others told me about my limitations. The student had written, "You taught me to question those assumptions and test my own boundaries. I'm in the college with confidence I never thought possible. Thank you for showing me what strength really looks like." This simple expression of gratitude carried profound significance for Ellen. It represented not just individual impact, but validation of the principle that had guided her through military service and civilian transition, that human potential, properly supported and directed, could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The commendations documented what she had done. The student's note affirmed why it mattered. As commencement approached, Ellen received an unexpected invitation from the senior class officers. They requested her participation in the graduation ceremony, not just as a faculty member, but as the keynote speaker selected by student vote. The request represented remarkable evolution in her institutional position, from invisible support staff to community exemplar in less than a year. "The seniors specifically asked for you," Principal Harrington explained, clearly pleased by the development. "They said your example of quiet excellence and unexpected strength represents what they hope to carry forward from their education." The board enthusiastically approved, of course. Ellen accepted the invitation with characteristic humility, focusing immediately on the responsibility it represented rather than the recognition it implied. She approached the task with methodical preparation, consulting with students about their expectations, reviewing previous commencement addresses, and distilling her experiences into transferable insights appropriate for graduating seniors. On commencement day, as she took her place among the platform party in academic regalia that felt far removed from both cafeteria uniform and military gear, Ellen observed the gathering community with quiet appreciation. Parents and siblings filled the auditorium, cameras ready to capture milestone moments. Faculty members sat in formal rows, their varied contributions united in this culminating ceremony. Seniors waited with barely contained excitement, their futures opening before them with all the possibility and uncertainty that transition brings. When introduced as the keynote speaker, Ellen moved to the podium without fanfare, her presence nonetheless commanding attention through composed authenticity rather than dramatic presentation. She surveyed the audience briefly before beginning her address, connecting with individual faces that represented the community she had unexpectedly joined and helped transform. "Today marks a significant transition," she began, her voice quiet yet carrying throughout the space. "You're completing one mission and preparing to embark on others, each with unique objectives and challenges. As someone who has navigated multiple transitions between seemingly different worlds, I'd like to offer some observations about what remains constant when everything else changes." Ellen proceeded without reference to her specific military background, focusing instead on universally applicable principles drawn from her diverse experiences. She spoke about discovering purpose beyond achievement, building resilience through intentional discomfort, and finding strength in vulnerability and connection. Most significantly, she addressed the relationship between individual capability and community contribution. "True excellence isn't measured by comparing yourself to others," she told the graduates, "but by how effectively you apply your unique capabilities to meaningful challenges. The question isn't whether you're stronger, faster, or smarter than those around you, but whether you're fully developing and purposefully directing the specific strengths you possess." She concluded with direct acknowledgement of the unexpected nature of her own journey and its implications for their futures. "A year ago, I was known simply as the lunch lady. Today, I'm addressing you as a commencement speaker. Neither role fully defines who I am, just as no single achievement or setback will define who you become. Your path will take unexpected turns. The constants that will guide you through those transitions are your core values, your developed capabilities, and your chosen commitments. Focus on strengthening those elements, and you'll find purpose and contribution in each chapter of your story." As summer settled over Newport, Ellen found herself navigating yet another transition. The commencement ceremony had marked not just the seniors' departure, but the conclusion of her first full academic year in progressive leadership roles. The quiet cafeteria supervisor had evolved into a recognized educational innovator, her influence extending far beyond Westridge's campus. This evolution brought new opportunities and challenges that required thoughtful consideration. The morning after commencement, Ellen followed her established routine, a 5-mile run along the coastline before dawn, followed by open water swimming in the still chilly harbor. These physical practices, maintained through all seasons and circumstances, provided continuity and grounding amid changing professional demands. As she cut through the morning waters, mind clear and body fully engaged, Ellen reflected on the path that had brought her to this unexpected juncture. Her phone held 17 unread messages when she returned to her apartment: conference invitations, consultation requests, and a particularly intriguing note from the Pentagon's Human Performance Division inquiring about potential collaboration. The military was reevaluating its approach to veteran transition, recognizing that traditional programs focused on employment basics rather than purpose-driven application of specialized skills. Ellen's journey from special operator to educational innovator represented a case study in effective knowledge transfer across contexts. "We're particularly interested in how you've translated specific elements of special operations into civilian development frameworks," the message explained. "The implications for both veteran transition and general performance enhancement appear significant." The inquiry captured a growing pattern in Ellen's professional correspondence recognition that her work at Westridge potentially offered value beyond educational settings. The principles and practices she had developed might apply across various domains where human performance and potential development mattered. This expanded application hadn't been her original intent, but it aligned with her fundamental mission of removing barriers to human capability. Before responding to any messages, Ellen walked to her small balcony overlooking the harbor, watching fishing boats head out for the day's work. She thought about the seniors who had just graduated, each beginning their own transition to new environments and challenges. She considered the incoming students who would participate in next year's programs, bringing fresh perspectives and needs. She reflected on her staff, developing their own leadership capabilities within the framework she had established. The contemplation clarified Ellen's priorities moving forward. While external opportunities deserved consideration, her primary commitment remained to Westridge and the programs still taking root there. Any expanded influence would need to develop organically from that foundation, rather than diverting energy from core responsibilities. With this clarity, Ellen began methodically addressing her messages, balancing receptivity to new possibilities with fidelity to existing commitments. Her response to the Pentagon inquiry reflected this balanced approach. I appreciate your interest in our work at Westridge. The programs here remain in active development, with much still to learn about optimal implementation and adaptation across contexts. I'm open to limited consultation that might benefit veteran transition, provided it complements rather than compromises my educational responsibilities. This measured engagement with external opportunities characterized Ellen's approach throughout the summer months. She accepted select speaking engagements that aligned with scheduled travel for program development. She contributed to professional publications with articles focused on practical implementation rather than theoretical frameworks. She participated in research collaborations that provided value to Westridge while generating broader insights. Most significantly, Ellen initiated a structured documentation project, working with her team to capture the principles, practices, and adaptation protocols that made their programs effective. This comprehensive resource would serve multiple purposes, ensuring continuity through personnel changes, facilitating implementation in diverse settings, and creating a foundation for ongoing evolution based on accumulated experience. We're creating a living manual, not a fixed prescription, she explained to her staff during a summer planning retreat. The goal is to preserve essential elements while encouraging contextual adaptation and continuous improvement. This isn't about replicating what we've done. It's about enabling others to apply these principles in ways that serve their specific needs. The documentation process revealed how far the programs had evolved from their initial formulations. What had begun as personal translation of military experience into educational practice had developed into sophisticated systems incorporating diverse influences and perspectives. Team members from various backgrounds had contributed insights that transformed original concepts into more nuanced and adaptable approaches. Jason Thompson, reviewing the athletic performance sections, noted this evolution with characteristic directness. This barely resembles what we started with, he observed. The military elements are still there in the foundation, but they're integrated with sports psychology, developmental science, and evidence-based education practices. It's become something entirely new. Ellen nodded, recognizing the accuracy of his assessment. That's exactly as it should be. Effective programs evolve through implementation and contribution. The original framework provided structure, but the content has been enriched by everyone involved in its development. This principle of collaborative evolution guided preparation for the upcoming academic year. Ellen created expanded opportunities for staff leadership, deliberately stepping back from direct implementation to enable others' growth and contribution. She established mentoring relationships between experienced team members and new hires, ensuring knowledge transfer while encouraging fresh perspectives. She developed assessment protocols that captured learning opportunities alongside outcome metrics. When asked by a national education journal about this leadership approach, Ellen explained the philosophy behind her methods. In special operations, we learned that mission success depends on developing capacity throughout the unit, not concentrating capability in designated leaders. Everyone needs the skills, knowledge, and judgment to adapt effectively when circumstances change. The same principle applies in educational settings. Sustainable excellence requires distributed capability rather than centralized expertise. This philosophy informed Ellen's response when Principal Harrington approached her with an unexpected proposal in late July. The superintendent of schools for a major metropolitan district had contacted Westridge about potentially implementing their wellness and excellence programs district-wide, affecting tens of thousands of students across dozens of schools. The opportunity represented dramatic expansion of impact, but would require Ellen's direct involvement in planning and initial implementation. They're prepared to create a special consulting arrangement, Harrington explained. You would maintain your position here while providing guidance for their system-wide adoption. It's an unprecedented opportunity to scale what you've built. Ellen received the proposal with thoughtful consideration rather than immediate excitement. Scale matters, she acknowledged, but so does implementation integrity. Programs like ours depend on committed local leadership and cultural alignment. They can't simply be imposed from above, especially across diverse school environments. Her response reflected hard-earned wisdom from both military and educational experience, recognition that effective systems require more than technical components or procedural compliance. The program's success at Westridge stemmed not just from methodological design, but from intentional culture development, leadership commitment, and community engagement. Replicating these elements across a large urban district would require careful strategy rather than mechanical reproduction. I'd want to approach this as capability development, not program installation, Ellen told Harrington. We would need to identify and develop local leaders who could adapt these approaches to their specific contexts. That's a longer process than typical consulting arrangements, but it's the only way to create sustainable implementation. This perspective shaped the eventual collaboration agreement. Rather than providing turnkey program materials or centralized direction, Ellen would develop a comprehensive leadership preparation process for selected educators from across the district. These teacher leaders would receive intensive training in program principles and practices, followed by ongoing mentorship as they adapted approaches to their specific school environments. We're not giving you a standardized program to implement, Ellen explained to the first cohort of 30 educators who arrived at Westridge for summer training. We're sharing frameworks, principles, and methodologies that you'll adapt for your unique contexts. Your expertise about your students and communities is essential to effective implementation. The training process reflected this philosophy, balancing structured instruction with collaborative problem-solving and contextual adaptation. Participants learned core program components through direct experience, then immediately engaged in application planning for their specific school environments. Ellen and her team provided guidance without prescribing solutions, encouraging creative adaptation while maintaining fidelity to fundamental principles. This reminds me of how we prepared for diverse operational environments, Ellen commented to Carmen as they observed group work sessions. The mission parameters remained constant, but tactical implementation had to adapt to specific terrain, cultural contexts, and available resources. These educators are applying the same adaptive thinking to their school environments. The Metropolitan Initiative represented just one dimension of the program's expanding influence. Throughout the summer, Ellen and her team hosted educators from across the country for observation and training opportunities. They developed digital resources that made key program elements accessible to schools with limited implementation capacity. They established research partnerships with universities interested in studying the approach's effectiveness across diverse student populations. This external engagement enriched the core programs at Westridge, bringing fresh perspectives and implementation challenges that prompted continued refinement. Each adaptation question from partner schools forced deeper articulation of essential principles. Each implementation obstacle revealed opportunities for process improvement. Each success in diverse contexts validated the approach's fundamental soundness while demonstrating their adaptability. We're learning as much from these partnerships as they're learning from us, Ellen observed during a team reflection session. Their questions and challenges push us to clarify our thinking and strengthen our methodologies. That's how effective systems evolve, through continuous testing and refinement in diverse conditions. As the new academic year approached, Ellen faced a calendar filled with expanded responsibilities: program leadership at Westridge, Metropolitan District consultation, professional speaking engagements, and research collaboration commitments. The scope extended far beyond her original cafeteria management role, creating potential for both increased impact and diffused effectiveness. Recognizing this challenge, Ellen applied the same strategic discipline to her professional commitments that had guided her military operations. She conducted a comprehensive mission analysis, identifying critical objectives and necessary resources for each responsibility area. She established clear priorities and decision criteria for managing competing demands. She developed contingency plans for high-risk periods when multiple commitments might create resource constraints. Most importantly, Ellen built support systems and accountability structures that protected core mission integrity. She established regular review sessions with key stakeholders at Westridge to ensure local programs maintained quality despite expanded external engagements. She created explicit boundaries around time commitments, preventing mission creep that might compromise primary responsibilities. She developed delegation protocols that balanced development opportunities for team members with consistent implementation standards. Your approach to these challenges is exactly what we teach students in the Excellence program, Jason observed during a planning meeting. You're modeling the principles in real-time: clear mission focus, resource alignment, priority maintenance, and continuous assessment. It's a living case study in effective performance under complex demands. Ellen acknowledged the observation with a thoughtful nod. These principles apply universally, whether in military operations, educational leadership, or personal development. Clear purpose, disciplined execution, and adaptive response to changing conditions enable effectiveness in any domain. The context changes, but the fundamental approach remains consistent. This consistency provided stability as Westridge welcomed students back for the new academic year. Despite expanded external commitments, Ellen maintained visible presence and active engagement with the school community. She taught selected program components personally, participated in new student orientation activities, and maintained her practice of regular cafeteria visits. During meal services, the cafeteria visits held particular significance, connecting Ellen to her original role while demonstrating continued commitment to the school's fundamental operations. Students who had heard about the Navy SEAL lunch lady but never experienced her cafeteria supervisor days observed these interactions with interest, noting how she engaged with kitchen staff as colleagues rather than subordinates and maintained genuine interest in nutritional details amid broader leadership responsibilities. "You still check the meal preparation personally," remarked a new faculty member who encountered Ellen reviewing lunch service. "I would have thought the executive director would delegate those details." Ellen smiled slightly as she examined the fresh vegetable preparation. "Nutritional quality is foundational to everything else we do," she explained. "If we're not providing proper fuel for developing minds and bodies, the most sophisticated performance programs won't matter." Besides, she added, "these interactions keep me connected to the practical realities of school operations." Leadership effectiveness depends on maintaining ground-level perspective. This philosophy informed Ellen's approach to her expanded responsibilities throughout the fall semester. As the Wellness and Excellence programs entered their second full implementation year at Westridge, she balanced strategic oversight with practical engagement, maintaining connection to daily operations while guiding overall direction. As the Metropolitan Initiative progressed from training to implementation, she divided attention between system-level guidance and school-specific support, ensuring both conceptual alignment and contextual adaptation. The dual focus maintaining program quality at Westridge while supporting expansion elsewhere created inevitable tensions. Time and attention represented finite resources, requiring careful allocation among competing priorities. External recognition brought opportunities that could either enhance or distract from core mission objectives. Success itself created expectations that stretched capacity and threatened sustainability. Ellen navigated these tensions with the same disciplined approach that had characterized her military leadership. She maintained clear decision criteria based on mission alignment rather than external pressure or personal preference. She protected essential functions while selectively engaging with enhancement opportunities. She built capacity throughout her team, developing leadership capabilities that reduced dependency on her direct involvement. Most significantly, Ellen maintained perspective about what ultimately mattered: the impact on students' development and well-being. When facing difficult allocation decisions, she consistently prioritized student needs over institutional recognition or program expansion. When external demands threatened to compromise implementation quality, she established boundaries that protected core program integrity. This student-centered focus guided a pivotal decision in mid-October, when Ellen declined a prestigious national speaking tour that would have significantly raised her professional profile but required extended absence during a critical implementation period. Instead, she proposed alternative engagement that would protect her availability for students while still contributing to the national conversation about educational innovation. "Your primary commitment remains here," she reminded her team when discussing the decision. "External recognition matters only to the extent that it advances our core mission of student development. When those objectives conflict, our priority should always be the students we serve directly." This clarity of purpose resonated throughout the organization, informing decisions at every level and creating institutional culture that reflected foundational values. Staff members demonstrated similar prioritization in their own role fulfillment, consistently choosing student impact over administrative convenience or professional advancement. Teachers adapted implementation approaches based on observed student needs rather than program prescriptions. Administrators allocated resources according to developmental outcomes rather than public visibility. The results of this aligned approach became increasingly evident as the semester progressed. Student engagement metrics showed significant improvement across academic, athletic, and extracurricular domains. Disciplinary incidents decreased while positive behavioral indicators increased. Health measures demonstrated continued progress in nutrition, physical activity, and stress management. Academic performance showed particular improvement among previously struggling students, suggesting enhanced capacity for learning challenges. Beyond these quantitative indicators, qualitative changes in school culture reflected deeper transformation. Students demonstrated increased ownership of their development, setting ambitious personal goals and creating accountability systems for achievement. Peer support networks emerged organically, with students applying program principles to help classmates through academic and personal challenges. Community service participation increased substantially, suggesting expanded perspective beyond individual achievement. Ellen observed these developments with quiet satisfaction, recognizing them as meaningful indicators of sustainable impact. The programs were no longer dependent on her personal implementation or even direct oversight. They had become embedded in institutional culture and student experience, maintained through distributed leadership and collective commitment. This evolution became particularly apparent during a November visit from Department of Education officials interested in the Westridge model. As the visitors observed program components in action across the school, they witnessed not isolated initiatives but integrated approaches woven throughout the educational experience. Wellness principles informed classroom design and instructional methods. Excellence concepts appeared in academic goal setting and assessment practices. Nutrition awareness influenced everything from cafeteria operations to biology curriculum. "What strikes me most," commented the lead evaluator during a debriefing session, "is how thoroughly these approaches permeate school culture. They're not add-on programs but fundamental operating principles that inform every aspect of the educational experience. That's remarkably difficult to achieve in established institutions." Ellen acknowledged the observation with characteristic focus on contributing factors rather than personal credit. "That integration reflects collective commitment and distributed leadership throughout our community," she explained. "Students, teachers, and administrators have incorporated these principles into their daily practices because they've experienced their effectiveness, not because they've been directed to comply with program requirements." This response exemplified Ellen's leadership philosophy, creating conditions for authentic engagement rather than imposing direction, developing capacity throughout the organization rather than centralizing control, measuring success through sustained impact rather than initial compliance. The approach had transformed Westridge from a traditional school with innovative programs into a learning community guided by integrated developmental principles. As winter approached, bringing Newport's characteristic coastal storms and early darkness, Ellen received an unexpected communication that prompted deeper reflection on her continuing evolution. Admiral Matthews, her former commanding officer in Naval Special Warfare, requested a meeting during his upcoming visit to the Naval War College. The message carried no specific agenda but mentioned interest in her innovative application of operational principles in educational contexts. The request created a curious resonance, a connection between past and present identities that Ellen had maintained separately throughout her civilian transition. Though she had drawn on military experience in developing educational approaches, she had rarely engaged directly with former colleagues about this translation process. The prospective meeting represented an opportunity to integrate professional chapters that had remained largely distinct in her experience. Ellen arranged to meet the Admiral at a quiet harborside restaurant on a Friday evening in early December. As she arrived, momentary uncertainty surfaced about appropriate greeting. Military formality had once defined their relationship, but circumstances had fundamentally changed for both. The Admiral resolved the question by extending his hand with casual warmth, his weathered face showing genuine pleasure at the reunion. "Ellen Rodriguez," he said with a smile, "still looking like you could pass the physical qualification test." Without breaking a sweat, Ellen returned the smile, noting the Admiral's civilian attire and relaxed demeanor, signs of his own transition since their last interaction. "It's good to see you, Admiral. Though I understand it's Professor Matthews these days." The Admiral nodded as they took their seats. "Teaching strategic studies at the War College. Quite a change from field operations, but rewarding in different ways. Rather like your move from special operations to education, though you've certainly made a bigger splash in your new domain." The conversation flowed with surprising ease as they ordered and received their meals. Military background providing shared reference points despite their divergent paths since Ellen's discharge. They exchanged updates on former teammates, discussed evolving special operations doctrines, and compared perspectives on veteran transition challenges. The Admiral proved remarkably well informed about Ellen's educational innovations, having followed their development through professional publications and Department of Defense briefings. "What you're doing has implications beyond schools," he observed as they finished their main course. "The translation principles you've developed adapting specialized military capabilities to civilian contexts without militarizing those environments. That's exactly what we're struggling with across veteran services. Most transition programs either ignore specialized skills or try to transfer them wholesale without appropriate adaptation. Your approach offers a middle path worth exploring. Ellen considered this observation thoughtfully. The key insight wasn't about which specific techniques to transfer, she explained. It was recognizing that underlying principles: clear purpose, progressive challenge, measured response, continuous improvement apply universally. The implementation methods change completely across contexts, but the foundational concepts remain valid. The Admiral nodded with evident appreciation. That's precisely what makes your work valuable beyond education. You've created an implementation methodology that preserves essential principles while adapting execution appropriately to civilian environments. That's relevant to healthcare, corporate performance, public service, any domain where human potential development matters. As their conversation continued over coffee, the Admiral revealed the purpose behind his visit. The Department of Defense was establishing a performance principles transfer initiative focused on improving veteran transition outcomes by facilitating more effective application of military-developed capabilities in civilian contexts. They sought Ellen's involvement as an advisor and potential program architect, based on her demonstrated success in this translation process. We're not asking you to leave your current position, the Admiral clarified. Your educational work provides the perfect ongoing laboratory for these principles. We're proposing a collaborative relationship you maintain your primary focus while helping us develop frameworks that could benefit transitioning service members across all branches. The proposal presented yet another expansion of influence, another opportunity to extend impact beyond Ellen's current domain. Yet unlike some previous opportunities, this one aligned perfectly with her foundational mission and personal experience. The possibility of helping other veterans navigate the challenging transition she had successfully completed herself resonated deeply with her service orientation. I'd want to approach this systematically, Ellen replied after careful consideration. Not as generic transition assistance, but as structured methodology for identifying transferable capabilities and appropriate civilian applications. The goal would be empowering veterans to create their own translation processes, not prescribing specific paths. The Admiral smiled with evident satisfaction. That's exactly the approach we need, teaching methodology rather than dictating outcomes. The diversity of veteran capabilities and civilian contexts requires adaptive frameworks, not standardized solutions. As they concluded their meeting with tentative next steps for the collaboration, Ellen found herself reflecting on the unexpected continuity between her military service and current work. What had initially seemed like distinct chapters in her professional life increasingly appeared as an integrated journey, each phase building upon and enhancing the others. The cafeteria supervisor role that many had perceived as beneath her capabilities had actually provided essential grounding in institutional operations and student needs. The revelation of her military background had created transformation opportunities that might not have emerged through CONVENTIO career progression. The leadership positions that followed had enabled system development that extended her impact far beyond personal implementation capacity. Walking along the darkened harbor after the meeting, Ellen watched fishing boats returning with their day's catch, navigation lights creating paths through the winter darkness. Their movement reflected her own journey, purposeful traversal through changing conditions, adaptation to environmental realities, steady progress toward meaningful objectives. The vessels and mission had changed, but the fundamental navigation principles remained consistent. Spring arrived in Newport with characteristic unpredictability, brilliant sunshine giving way to sudden squalls, warm afternoons retreating before chilly evening fog. Ellen embraced these transitions during her morning runs, adapting her pace en route to changing conditions, just as she had adapted her professional approach to evolving responsibilities throughout the academic year. The collaborative relationship with the Department of Defense had developed methodically since her December meeting with Admiral Matthews. Ellen had assembled a small working group that included veterans from diverse service backgrounds, transition specialists, and educational experts. Together, they were developing a comprehensive framework for translating military-acquired capabilities into civilian contexts, not just employment skills but deeper competencies in leadership, crisis management, strategic planning, and performance optimization. We're addressing the disconnect between how veterans see themselves and how civilian organizations perceive them, Ellen explained during a presentation to Pentagon officials. Most transition programs focus on resume translation and interview techniques, essentially how to get hired. We're focusing on capability translation, how to effectively apply specialized, military-developed skills in civilian environments. The framework they developed emphasized personalized assessment and contextual adaptation rather than standardized pathways. Veterans identified their core capabilities through structured reflection exercises, then explored potential civilian applications through guided exploration and experimental implementation. The process acknowledged both the value of military-developed competencies and the necessity of contextual translation for effective civilian application. The goal isn't to create military-style systems in civilian settings, Ellen emphasized. It's to extract the underlying principles that make military training effective and apply them appropriately in completely different environments. A former special operator might never again need tactical room-clearing skills, but the situational awareness, team coordination, and decision-making capabilities developed through that training remain valuable in countless civilian contexts. This nuanced approach distinguished their work from previous transition initiatives, many of which either minimized military experience or attempted to transfer it too directly without appropriate adaptation. Early pilot programs showed promising results, with participants reporting improved confidence in civilian role performance and receiving positive feedback from employers about their contributions. The Pentagon collaboration represented just one dimension of Ellen's expanding influence. The Metropolitan District implementation continued developing, with trained teacher leaders now implementing adapted programs in 27 schools across diverse neighborhoods. Universities had initiated research studies examining the approach's effectiveness with different student populations. Professional associations had incorporated key elements into recommended practices for student development. Through this expansion, Ellen maintained unwavering focus on Westridge as her primary commitment and living laboratory. The original programs continued evolving based on implementation experience and student feedback, becoming increasingly refined and adaptive. New components addressed emerging needs, including specialized approaches for students with learning differences and enhanced parent engagement strategies. Most significantly, Ellen observed the program's transition from innovative initiatives to established institutional culture. Wellness principles now informed everything from classroom design to policy development. Excellence concepts appeared in curriculum planning, extracurricular activities, and community engagement. Nutritional awareness extended from cafeteria operations to home practices through parent education and student leadership. The most meaningful indicator isn't program compliance, but cultural integration, Ellen noted during a board presentation. When these approaches become how we naturally operate rather than special programs we implement, that's when transformation becomes sustainable. This cultural integration manifested in student experiences and outcomes. Academic performance continued improving across demographic groups, with particularly significant gains among previously underperforming populations. Athletic achievements reflected enhanced recovery practices and mental performance techniques. Social-emotional indicators showed positive trends in stress management, conflict resolution, and community engagement. Beyond these measurable outcomes, Ellen observed subtler but equally important developments in student mindset and approach. Challenges were increasingly met with strategic problem-solving rather than frustration or avoidance. Setbacks prompted analytical assessment rather than discouragement or blame. Success was measured through personal improvement rather than comparative achievement. These changes reflected the program's fundamental orientation toward growth processes rather than fixed outcomes, teaching students how to approach challenges effectively rather than prescribing specific pathways or achievements. The approach prepared them not just for academic success, but for navigating life's inevitable complexities and transitions with adaptability and resilience. "We're not developing programs," Ellen explained to a visiting educational delegation. "We're developing capabilities in students, in faculty, in the entire school community. Those capabilities then generate appropriate responses to whatever challenges emerge, allowing continuous adaptation rather than rigid implementation." This capability-centered perspective informed Ellen's leadership approach as her responsibilities continued expanding. Rather than attempting to control implementation details across multiple initiatives, she focused on developing decision-making frameworks that enabled others to apply program principles appropriately in their specific contexts. Rather than prescribing solutions, she taught methodologies for generating context-appropriate approaches based on fundamental principles. The approach created sustainable expansion that didn't depend on Ellen's direct involvement in every implementation. Teacher leaders in the Metropolitan Initiative adapted program elements to their specific school environments while maintaining fidelity to core principles. Researchers examining program effectiveness contributed refinements based on diverse student populations. Pentagon collaboration partners developed specialized applications for veteran transition contexts. "You've mastered the art of influence without control," observed Dr. Patel during a wellness team meeting. "The programs maintain consistency despite diverse implementations because you've focused on transferring understanding rather than mandating compliance. People implement effectively because they comprehend the underlying principles, not because they're following prescriptive instructions." Ellen acknowledged this observation with thoughtful consideration. "That approach comes directly from special operations experience," she explained. "In complex, rapidly changing environments, mission success depends on distributed decision-making capacity. When team members understand command intent and operational principles, they can adapt appropriately to emerging conditions without requiring constant direction." This philosophy had proven particularly valuable during an unexpected challenge. In early April, when a national educational assessment organization published a report questioning whether wellness and excellence programs diverted resources from core academic subjects. The report cited no specific evidence regarding Westridge's approaches, but created potential controversy through general claims about non-academic initiatives. Rather than implementing a centralized response strategy, Ellen activated the distributed leadership capacity she had developed throughout the organization. Department chairs compiled evidence of academic improvements correlated with program implementation. Students prepared testimonials about how the approaches had enhanced their learning capacity. Parents organized information sessions highlighting observed benefits across developmental domains. The resulting community response demonstrated both the program's effectiveness and their deep integration into school culture. Rather than defending isolated initiatives, stakeholders throughout the Westridge community articulated how integrated wellness and excellence principles enhanced every aspect of educational experience. The spontaneous, authentic response proved far more compelling than any centrally coordinated campaign could have achieved. "You created the conditions for that response through years of authentic engagement," Principal Harrington commented afterward. "Because these principles genuinely work and have become part of our shared culture, The defense came naturally from everyone who has experienced their benefits. Ellen nodded in agreement. The best validation comes through lived experience, not administrative assertion. When students, teachers, and parents can articulate how these approaches have improved their lives, that carries more weight than any official response ever could. This principle that authentic experience speaks more powerfully than formal authority guided Ellen's approach to an unexpected opportunity that emerged in late April. The governor's office contacted Westridge about featuring their programs in a statewide educational initiative focused on preparing students for future challenges. The proposal included substantial implementation funding and potential influence on educational policy throughout the state. The opportunity represented significant expansion potential, but carried implementation complexities that required careful consideration. Statewide scaling would involve diverse school environments with varying resources, leadership approaches, and student populations. Political dimensions might create pressure for quantifiable short-term outcomes rather than sustainable cultural development. Administrative requirements could potentially compromise the program's adaptive nature and contextual responsiveness. Ellen approached these considerations with the same strategic assessment she had applied to complex missions throughout her career. She conducted detailed analysis of potential benefits and risks, consulted with key stakeholders about implementation requirements, and developed criteria for effective participation that would protect program integrity while enabling broader impact. We need to ensure that any expansion maintains our core principles, she explained during a planning session with her leadership team. Adaptive implementation based on local context, capability development rather than compliance requirements, and sustained cultural integration rather than short-term metrics. If those conditions can't be maintained, broader distribution might actually undermine program effectiveness. The team developed a proposal that emphasized transferring methodology rather than prescribing specific implementations, teaching participating schools how to develop context-appropriate applications based on fundamental principles. The approach would require more intensive initial engagement, but would create sustainable implementation capacity throughout the educational system rather than dependency on central direction. We're not offering a standardized program for mechanical reproduction, Ellen explained when presenting the proposal to state officials. We're offering a developmental methodology that enables schools to create appropriate applications for their specific environments. The principles remain consistent, but the implementation adapts to local conditions. This methodology-centered approach ultimately distinguished Westridge's contribution to the state initiative. Rather than providing turnkey programs for immediate deployment, they developed a comprehensive capability transfer process that included principle articulation, context assessment, adaptation methodology, implementation frameworks, and evaluation systems. The approach required greater initial investment, but promised more sustainable, long-term outcomes across diverse educational environments. As Ellen turned toward her apartment, she noticed a small group of incoming freshmen touring the campus. With their parents, their expressions mixing excitement and apprehension about the unknown experiences awaiting them. Their presence completed the cycle of educational renewal. As one cohort departed toward new challenges, another prepared to begin their developmental journey. Ellen observed these young students with quiet appreciation for the potential their journey represented. They would encounter challenges they couldn't currently anticipate, develop capabilities they didn't yet recognize, and create contributions they couldn't presently envision. The wellness and excellence principles embedded in Westridge's culture would provide frameworks for that development, not as prescriptive programs, but as adaptive methodologies for navigating life's inevitable challenges and transitions. This continuity, the transmission of developmental principles across generations of students, represented the most meaningful outcome of Ellen's unexpected professional evolution. The specific programs would continue adapting to changing educational needs, but the fundamental approach to human development would maintain consistent influence on students' capability development and life navigation. Ellen smiled slightly as she continued her walk, acknowledging the profound symmetry between her military training and current educational work. Both focused ultimately on the same essential mission: developing human capability to meet complex challenges effectively. The context differed dramatically, but the fundamental purpose remained consistent: enabling people to perform at their best under challenging conditions, to adapt effectively to changing circumstances, and to contribute meaningfully to collective objectives. The cafeteria lady nobody noticed had indeed been a decorated Navy SEAL, applying specialized capabilities in unassuming service. But her most significant contribution hadn't come through dramatic revelation or public recognition. It had emerged through consistent application of fundamental principles in everyday contexts: the patient, methodical development of systems that enabled others to discover and apply their own capabilities effectively. That approach, quiet excellence focused on meaningful contribution rather than personal recognition, had ultimately created far greater impact than any dramatic demonstration could have achieved. By developing capabilities in others rather than showcasing her own, Ellen had created sustainable transformation that would continue influencing lives long after any individual achievement might have been forgotten. As afternoon light bathed the campus in golden warmth, Ellen reached the harbor path that led to her apartment. The water stretched toward the horizon, constantly changing yet fundamentally consistent, an apt metaphor for the developmental journey she had shared with the Westridge community. Specific conditions changed continuously, but the principles of effective navigation remained constant through all transitions. Ellen followed the familiar path homeward, her mind already considering next steps in program development, Pentagon collaboration, and statewide implementation. The mission continued evolving, presenting new challenges and opportunities that would require adaptive application of fundamental principles. But the essential approach remained consistent: developing human capability to meet life's challenges effectively, regardless of specific context or circumstance. That mission had guided Ellen through Special Operations Service, cafeteria management, program development, and educational innovation. It would continue guiding her through whatever unexpected chapters might yet unfold in her continuing journey of quiet excellence and meaningful contribution. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.